All right, getting everything going. Can you guys hear me okay?
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you, Jake. Presentation pulled up. All right, everyone. It moved around. For some reason, it's covering everything. There we go. All right, sorry about that. Good afternoon. My name is Frank Gonzalez, Food Safety Program Manager with the Office of Food Safety and Environmental Services. Sorry, I don't know why my screen is black right now. Give me 1 second. Let me turn off my camera, and that should be better. All right. The programs that I manage include manufactured food, marijuana kitchens, school gardens, and our FDA human food contract. I'll be providing an overview today of a manufactured food inspection walkthrough. First, here's our food safety team within the Office of Food Safety and Environmental Services. And right now we do have 5 individuals that are actually conducting inspections right now and one that is about to be fully trained. All right. The topics I'll be covering today are retail versus manufactured food. What are the key differences between the two? The Arizona state rules, and giving an overview of what a current good manufacturing practice inspection walkthrough entails. First, let's discuss what the difference is between retail food facilities versus manufactured food facilities. Retail food facilities are smaller kitchens that provide food to local communities and possibly individuals visiting our great state. The main difference, however, is their sales are directly to consumers. Now let's look into manufactured food facilities. These facilities are greater in size, with equipment that may be in regular retail kitchens, but larger in size to produce a greater quantity of product in a shorter amount of time. And these sales are indirect, meaning not directly to consumer, but to other businesses that then would sell that product to the consumer. Manufacturers' indirect sales are not only shipped to businesses in Arizona, but are shipped to businesses located outside of Arizona and sometimes even other countries. Arizona state rules we'll look into now in regards to manufactured food facilities. Article 9, manufactured food facilities, is currently waiting for the governor's office approval. This proposal will be adopting the 21 CFR Part 117, Current Good Manufacturing Practice, Hazard Analysis, and Risk-Based Preventive Control for Human Food. However, only subpart A, B, and F will be adopted in whole. Therefore, let's dive into what this presentation is about. Inspection walkthrough of a manufactured food facility. Without the state rules, we are currently conducting FDA contract inspections using the 21 CFR Part 117, and this inspection overview will be equivalently applied in manufactured food facilities at the state level. And like I mentioned before, there are 5 of us that are conducting these inspections on behalf of the FDA. All right, like any inspection, you'll arrive to the facility and would introduce yourself, showing your credentials to the most responsible person at time of inspection. This person can be a QA manager, a facility manager, and sometimes even the owner of the business. At this time, you would review past inspection reports, review any complaints that you may be addressing during the inspection, and also ensure all information that is on their license is up to date and accurate. Before walking into the manufacturing area, we make sure all PPE, personal protective equipment that the facility requires, is being met. We ask what is being manufactured at this time of, when you arrive. This will give an idea of the product flow from receiving ingredients to packaging of the final product. We then let the most responsible person know that there are documentation which we will be reviewing after the walkthrough, such as training records, pest application reports, and recall procedures. This all is something the facility could gather all their documentation while we're doing the walkthrough. Most of the time, the person in charge or most responsible person is asking someone else to gather this while we're doing the walkthrough. With that, let's look into receiving of ingredients. Like I mentioned before, the product flow starts from ingredients received all the way to packaging of the final product. When looking at the ingredients received, questions may come up during the walkthrough, such as, is the firm keeping track of what ingredients are being received and from what supplier? Does the facility actually have an approved supplier list? And this list is something that they have already done their homework on their end, making sure that the product they're receiving is being properly handled, whether it's the farm or even at another plant. Furthermore, does the facility have log sheets of items received that required to be kept at proper temperature during transport? Do they know if the trucks that are bringing the ingredients has a monitoring system that notifies them when the cold holding unit has exceeded the maximum allowable temperature in the truck itself? That leads to questions for the most responsible person, like what is their corrective action if there are any ingredients out of temperature during receiving? Then we would inspect the ingredient area in whole. This can include how items are stored and organized in the actual facility. For example, ingredients with declared allergens stored near or above each other or other ingredients, and making sure chemicals are stored away from ingredients. We would bring up any structural items during the walkthrough that may need to be addressed, such as roll-up doors having gaps, which will allow the possibility of pests to enter the facility, floors that may be damaged, walls, and of course ceilings, making sure those are properly intact, no possibility of any dripping or anything like that, and other issues, of course, that we observe. Now let's look into the manufacturing flow. We usually ask the most responsible person to walk us through their manufacturing steps from the beginning to the end. There, we'll see if there are any critical control points. If so, are those critical control points being met? Looking at this diagram, you can see the flow of manufacturing in yellow. And I'll point that out here. Equipment in black. And then also the critical control points in red. There are different critical control points depending on the manufacturing establishment itself, such as employee cross-contact, cooking temperatures, pasteurization, and even metal detection. In this diagram, it looks like there are 3 different critical control points, which you want to make sure they are meeting their set parameters. A question that I would ask the most responsible person is, what are their corrective actions if they do not meet those set parameters? Looking closely at the metal detection machine on the bottom left of this diagram, located right here, questions I would ask are, is the machine actually being checked? How frequent is the machine being checked, and by whom? I would ask if the metal detection machine can be checked during the inspection, and if possible, by the employee who is in charge of the equipment at time of inspection. This would then get that light bulb going in my head, asking and wondering if the actual employee that is operating that equipment is properly trained to conduct that job task. And that's something that you would ask at the end of the inspection in regards to training records, making sure that each employee has their training record and the job task that they're conducting, they were properly trained for that. So this can be further reviewed, like I mentioned, at closeout in the actual firm's training logs. However, while in the manufacturing area, you want to review all equipment being used. We usually ask questions like, how does the equipment work? How frequent do you clean it? And what is the sanitation process? If there's something that is being missed in the sanitation process, you may even ask if their sanitation parameters are meeting the manufacturer's sanitation requirements for that particular equipment. The last area of the product flow is packaging of the final product. The question we ask and review during the walkthrough are, do they have correct labels with declared allergens, if any? I personally like to look at all different aspects of the packaging, making sure it is actually properly packaged, and ask the person in charge if there is any other labels that they add for their company. And that leads to, are they co-packing for any other company? And co-packing is when a facility adds another company's label on their product for their packaging. So that's where, I would then walk around, make sure that the storage of the actual packaged product, they usually place them in boxes like this image shows, is being stored properly off the ground. I would check the structure itself in this area, making sure that there's no cross-contamination occurring with the final product. And lastly, who are their top customers and where is the product that was being manufactured today going? Sometimes the operator, or excuse me, the most responsible person would even show you how they track the product in case of a recall. They usually go to the actual label itself or the packaging and describe to you, what the numbers are on the packaging that is then further capable of, typing in their database to then make sure and trace back where the product is going or has gone, I should say. The final part of the inspection would be to conduct a closeout interview. Before typing out your report and reviewing it with the most responsible person, you want to review any documentation you may have requested before the facility walkthrough or even during the facility walkthrough. Like I mentioned, the employee that was conducting or was in charge of the metal detection machine, that's probably the employee I would ask them to pull up. Can I please see Frank's training sheet or log sheet and review, make sure that, the training records that they have is actually meeting the requirements that are laid out in subpart F of the 21 CFR Part 117. I would also ask to review the pest prevention if the facility is actually conducting any pest prevention, and is that being conducted by a licensed company, and are the pest report documentation being kept? In that sense, I usually ask for, that month that I'm inspecting. If not, if it's the beginning of the month, last month's inspection report, maybe 4 months before prior, and maybe a year ago. That's usually what I like to do. And then I would go down the pest report itself, making sure that there's no activity. And like we know, especially in the rural areas, there's, pests. So we're making sure that it's not entering the facility, that any activity is exterior of the facility. And that leads me to making sure that the actual facility is having exterior and interior treatment being conducted by that licensed company. And lastly, you want to make sure that the facility has a recall procedure. Questions then would come up whether or not they conduct mock recalls, and even asking how frequent do they revise their recall procedures. Sometimes when we're in these facilities, when you ask to review the recall procedure, they might not even have a revised date, but when you ask them, how old is this? Oh, 10, 20, 25 years old. That's when you bring up, has anything in your process changed since you last revised this? And most of the time it's yes. New equipment, the building possibly that they're in now, they might have, had a new establishment itself. They transitioned to a bigger one or a smaller one. But with that, lastly, you want to make sure you always ask whether or not they have been a part of a recall from the supplier or even initiate a recall. And if they have, you want to review, make sure, again, that the recall procedure actually was effective. How quick did they recall all that product? Back to the recall, mock recall, there's no real set time frame for mock recalls, but most of the establishments try to conduct that twice a year, and even once a year. You want to ask how effective was it? How quick were you able to, trace back the product? What form of outreach do you give to your businesses that you sold your product to? Do you call them, email, post it on your website? What efforts do you put forward to actually recall that product as quickly as possible? All right. You would then, from there, review any complaints that were addressed during the inspection, and now review your inspection report itself. This includes going over any observation or comments you may have documented from your walkthrough. I and my team always provide any resources that we might find helpful to the operator or the facility. Whether just like any retail establishment, we're there to help. And that's something that always comes first, is making sure they're educated and they know that we're here one call away, one email away. However, before leaving, I thank the most responsible person and all the individuals walking with me. Sometimes that is just the most responsible person, but a lot of the times there's 5, 6 individuals walking with you. And again, you just want to thank them for their time and providing all the information they provided you during the inspection walkthrough and also during the documentation review. And that will conclude my presentation of a manufactured food inspection walkthrough. Thank you all for attending my presentation. And here's our website where you can find more about ADHS, manufactured food frequently asked questions, and other resources. We can be contacted at manfood@azdhs.gov. And I will also provide my contact info in the chat shortly. And now the floor is yours with any questions any of you may have.
Awesome. Great job, Frank. It looks like we do have a couple questions. Before you answer the first one, could you reference our group chat real quick?
No problem. All right, there we go. Turn on my camera.
Oh, the team group chat is what I meant. I'm sorry.
Rebecca, I hope. Is everything back on your end? I know I was still presenting on accident.
No, we can see Slido right now. You're good.
Perfect.
All right. So
Also,
can you see the questions in Slido?
I can, and I see the first one. Sorry, my screens are split.
Okay.
And I need to exit out that. Perfect. Thank you for your guys' patience.
All right. Well, it looks like we have the most votes on this one here. Is there a quota to do so many inspections per day? How long does it take you to typically do an inspection?
So that's a great question. At the state level, there's not our inspection frequency. And again, this is all off of the rules that have not gone through just yet and is waiting at the governor's office for approval. But with the actual rule set, the frequency of inspections that is proposed is high risk being conducted every 3 years and low risk every 5. And with that, with the number that we were provided by the FDA of number of facilities in our great state, of manufacturing facilities, I should say, for human food, that would lead to probably 2 to 3 inspections a day. And that's a 4 to 5 day work week. However, how long does it take? Typically, it varies. Some of these facilities are not manufacturing and they're actually just holding human food at a warehouse. And that typically takes, an hour to an hour and a half. However, the manufacturing facilities could take from an hour, maybe it's a small business, to 6 hours. Again, that all depends on what they're actually producing and how big their establishment is. I've done one locally that was 1 million square feet, and that one took me honestly about close to 7.5 hours just to inspect that. So it all varies on, what they're doing and how big their facility is.
Awesome. And then for the next question, do you check for FSMA requirements? Did you check the team chat for that?
Yeah, so FSMA itself, the requirements are to be registered with the FDA, but those requirements with FSMA are strongly focused on preventive control inspections. So that's something that is in Subpart C, and not saying that we do not check for FSMA requirements, but we do not enforce Subpart C. So I hope that answers your question in full.
There we go. All right. Do you coordinate with the FDA to prevent state visits to sites recently visited by them, avoiding unnecessary inspections?
So that is one of the areas that I'm in charge of, being in direct communication with our state liaison and making sure that not only our contract inspections that we're dealt are being correlated properly to make sure we're not going in there twice, but then also there are FDA inspectors that are assigned only for Arizona. And again, sometimes even outside inspectors from other states help out, to inspect facilities on behalf of the FDA. And that's something that we're excited to work bi-weekly, if not weekly, with our FDA liaison to make sure that we're all on the same page. We know what facilities have been inspected that year, so it's not being inspected twice in a year. That doesn't mean that, if we inspect one, let's say this year, that in 2 years FDA is not there on behalf of the FDA. So again, I hope that answers your question. It's a great question, but it's all about communication, and that is something we actually conduct quite frequently, if not a daily basis, every other day. I'm reaching out to our liaison just to make sure we're up to date, especially during these times.
Okay, thank you. Next question, do you check for requirements from Sanitary Transportation Act as part of FSMA?
So that's something that we do question during inspection, making sure that the establishment themselves are conducting those inspection or, those requirements. However, like I mentioned before, that is a part of subpart G, if I'm not mistaken, in regards to the transport. And that's something we aren't adopting at this time, but it is something we're reassuring that the establishment is actually conducting. And during their FDA inspection, that is something that is being asked and documented on the inspection itself.
Awesome. All right, is there a database in collaboration with the FDA when it comes to manufactured foods?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one, Rebecca?
Yeah, of course. Is there a database in collaboration with the FDA when it comes to manufactured foods?
There is a database that FDA has internally. However, we as inspectors have ESAF. It's where we actually go in, review our contract inspections. There's other ones that we request access to be able to find out the facility's past history, whether or not they're actually registered with the FDA. And those databases are only by request. So you need to be, a contract or a credentialed inspector. And mostly the liaison is the one who's like, yes, they are part of Arizona's team and they can get granted access. So that's something that we do have access to. But again, since we're not FDA employees, we have limited access to.
Thank you. Go to the next one. How difficult is it to understand complex equipment and evaluate cleaning protocols?
That's a great question. So like many of us, and I'm just speaking for myself, I do not know everything. So that's something that I take my time, especially during the inspection, and make sure that I'm not overlooking anything. These manufacturers, they're producing a large quantity of product. And like I mentioned before, that quantity is being shipped everywhere. So that's where I make sure that I'm taking my time with the equipment, making sure, okay, do you know your equipment? Are you the actual manual that comes with the equipment? Do you know how to remove every part of it to make sure that all the screws, all the belts, everything that comes in contact with the product itself is being sanitized properly? Are your sanitation procedures being met to the fullest? What chemicals are you using to make sure that you're properly sanitizing that equipment? And like I mentioned during my presentation, allergen cross-contact is a big thing. Making sure that if a bakery is making peanut butter cookies in the morning, what's your procedure if you're, actually making sugar cookies later this afternoon? Making sure they're giving you the right answer. If they're not, and you're over here, questioning and questioning, can I speak with your boss? Still nothing. Can I review your SOPs? You're noticing even in the SOPs, they don't have any sanitation practices in between the transition of allergens. That's something then you would, like any inspector, stop the manufacturing process itself and make sure that any cross-contamination product is being held back and reviewing with them what the next steps will be. I hope I don't
Awesome.
go too far into these questions because my mind really
No,
starts.
it's okay. That's the last one we have time for.
Oh,
I'll go ahead and send you these in chat if you would like to answer them during the next presentation.
perfect. No, thank you, everyone. And again, if you have any other further questions, please email us at any time or myself.
Awesome.